Ooh yeah, time for a new Patreon plug. All Mocha supporters get access to exclusive creator commentaries and other occasional bonuses like a recent hour-plus vlog on the Apple River case. All for just $2. And high rollers who want to cough up 5 clams get to watch feature videos a bit earlier than everyone else. Enjoy the video, kids.
Pigs are like dogs. If you put a bunch of food out for a dog, it will eat all the food. If you put a bunch of food out for a cat, when the cat is full, it quits.
Yeah.
If you put out a bunch of food for a pig, it will eat it until it can't eat anymore.
They don't know. They're pigs.
Yes.
They just, it's instinct, right?
Yes.
But we as people know that food for pigs is not a person.
Right.
We as people do indeed know this. In fact, the notion that food for pigs is not a person is so widely accepted and deeply ingrained in the collective human psyche that it just about always goes unsaid. So in the extremely rare instance that someone does say it, as Detective Eric Henderson just has to Susan Monica, it's natural for one to wonder, why on earth did he just say that? Much like the statement itself, the story behind it is pretty straightforward, though far from normal. Susan Monica owned a farm in Weimar, Oregon, and she would often hire handymen, usually transients, to help out around the place. One of them was a 56-year-old man named Robert Haney, who began living and working on the farm sometime in 2013. In September of that same year, however, people stopped hearing from Robert. When you're a bit of a nomad like Robert was, though, it can take a while after you cease communications for anyone to notice that something might be amiss. So it wasn't until January of 2014 that Haney's son contacted Jackson County Police to report his father's disappearance. Naturally, they paid Susan Monica a visit, her being the last known person to have had regular contact with Robert. According to Susan, Robert had been in a rage when he left last September, leaving his camper residence in a state behind him. Though frankly the entire farm was in disrepute, so it didn't exactly look out of place. At this preliminary stage of the investigation, there was no glaring reason for authorities to disbelieve Susan's story. But it was as they were going to leave and passing by her pig pen that she made an offhand comment that caused their ears to perk up a little bit. Without prompting, Susan Monica stated that she was currently trying to obtain a government grant to conduct research on how pigs consume human bodies. They found that remark strange. And during a follow-up interview a few days later, they also found it strange when Susan, again without prompting, told them that she would regularly threaten to murder her neighbours and feed them to her pigs. Though while she thought the pigs would likely be up to the task, it probably wouldn't be a good idea from a nutritional standpoint. Paraphrasing a little bit, but that was the gist of it. Not long after that encounter, authorities discovered that Haney's food stamp card had recent activity on it. Activity that Susan Monica would admit was her own. This, combined with her previous off-color statements and other discoveries we'll get to in due course, was enough for Susan to be placed under arrest and taken into the police station for questioning.
You don't want the sandwich?
Not at the moment.
All right.
And I don't want my pants either, but since I shit in my pants, without you being able to wipe my ass here.
So,
Detective Henderson quite rudely neglects to offer Susan the use of the station's toilet, likely because he believes there are more pressing matters at hand. He goes over some of the verbiage in the search warrant at Susan's request because she believes any technical inaccuracies within it will void whatever discoveries it might produce, a contention which Henderson also completely ignores.
How do they put it? Any and all information received in a warrant that's not correct is not...
Well, you know that I was talking to you about Robert Haney's Oregon Trail card, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And we talked about how, a little bit already, about how he had given you permission, you said, to use the Oregon Trail card 3.5 months ago.
Something
like that.
Before he disappeared.
Right.
When he left, I didn't think he needed, I didn't think about the card. Okay. But you mentioned him needing food. I figured if he had gone to Ashland and was working, he had money to buy food.
When did this working in Ashland thing come up?
Well, I don't know if it was actual working or not.
Okay. And you had mentioned something before about Robert saying that his daughter had been raped.
Yes, he mentioned that several times, mostly when, he got really drunk.
Did he say he was going to go to Ashland to work?
Sort of.
Susan paints herself as only having a vague insight into what Robert's reasons for leaving might have been, and what his state of mind was. But the general idea she seems to be trying to convey is that he may have travelled to Ashland with plans of ultimately avenging his daughter's rape. When he left his food stamp card behind, she just didn't think much about using it here and there. He'd left all his stuff behind, including his dog, so she just assumed he'd be coming back eventually.
So what do you think happened to Robert?
The only thing that made any sense to me, after a couple of months had gone by and I had talked to the son, which...
Jesse?
No.
Robert Jr.?
No.
Bobby?
Bobby. I talked to...
Robert Jr., yeah.
Okay, Robert, okay. Bobby. I talked to Bobby, and like I said, this was a month after I had seen him last.
Mm-hmm.
A month, maybe more. When Bobby had told me that his sister usually got a call a couple times a week, that was when I first kind of thought in the back of my head somewhere that if he indeed went to take care of business, with the rape thing, that he might have gotten the short end of the stick.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they came out last week, they said they thought he was dead. And I'm saying, I didn't say out loud, but I'm thinking to myself, well, if you think your father is dead, why didn't you do something about this months ago?
Mm-hmm. Why didn't you call?
Well, I had no reason to call him.
But he lives on your property for a long time, and he never came back.
Susan doesn't have any real answer for this, beyond that she just didn't think alerting authorities to Robert's sudden, unexplained, and ultimately month-plus-long disappearance was her responsibility. It's not a terribly convincing excuse, but ultimately whether or not Susan has a convincing story is neither here nor there in this case, in light of a discovery police made earlier in the morning during a preliminary sweep of her property.
That appears to be possibly human, but further examination obviously appears to be an ankle, foot, knee joint.
Susan, we found a leg by your house. We found a leg right next to your place.
A leg?
A human leg next to your place. I think it might be Robert.
Don't know.
Who could it be?
No idea. I guess I should ask where it was. If it was down there by his trailer.
No. It was right next to your place. Just a few feet from your place.
I don't know then. If it were down by his trailer, he might have fallen down the hill or something. But if it was up at my place, I don't know.
Do you think it's kind of strange that there's a leg right next to your place?
Very.
Does it concern you?
Yes.
Do you think it might be Robert?
It could be, but I can't understand why. I can't understand how it would get there, because I can't see him having an accident up by my place.
What's your best reasoning for how it got there?
Coyote?
For clarification, Susan isn't floating the idea that a rabid coyote murdered Robert, tore him to pieces, and scattered him across her farm. She's more going for the angle that Robert might have returned to the property at some point, met some horrible fate somewhere not as incriminating as her front doorstep, And then after being torn to pieces by means currently unknown, a coyote may have moved his leg close to her place. Detective Henderson still has his reservations.
When I told you that there was a leg by your place, your expression didn't change. It doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal.
Yeah, it is.
Susan sort of illustrated Detective Henderson's point with her response to it. Is Susan's affect inappropriately flat for someone who's just learned a human leg has been discovered on her property?
Yeah, it is.
Well, certainly if I found a leg by my house, I'd be freaked out.
Well, I'm not freaked out, but I'm, very surprised. And the other thing is, like I say, that warrant's no good because it's written up wrong. And if you did find a leg, it's immaterial evidence anyway.
It's hard to know precisely what Susan means by that in this moment. She's probably making reference to clerical errors in the warrant. In her eventual appeals, she winds up being convicted by the way, the warrant will still be a point of contention though. What she'll wind up arguing is that because the original investigation was in regards to identity theft, the use of Robert's food stamp card, searching the wider property as opposed to just Robert's living quarters for instance, was outside the scope of that investigation. If the search hadn't been excessively broad, they wouldn't have found the leg. Therefore, the discovery of the leg is illegitimate and can't be used as evidence against Susan. This is a concept known as fruit of the poisonous tree, and it's an interesting one, but the courts wound up finding it didn't come close to applying in this case, and that's probably why her original lawyers didn't even try to argue it. Police had reason enough to believe evidence of identity theft could have been uncovered anywhere on the farm, and the warrant did in fact give them authority to do so. Once the leg was discovered, they were of course also entitled to broaden the scope of their initial investigation from identity theft to homicide. After finally letting Susan have a bathroom break and giving her something to eat, Detective Eric Fox, who's been sitting silently in the corner this entire time, joins in the questioning, trying to impress upon Susan where this investigation will inevitably be heading.
Obviously, there's a human leg there. Okay, it's
Possibly, yes.
Well, it's human.
I'm still not.
It's human. I can guarantee you that.
Okay.
Okay, and it's somewhat decomposed. I mean, it's been around for a while. Obviously, it came from a person. So,
Well, that's like I said, the only logical explanation I would have is if it were somewhere other than in the pig pen,
right,
that a coyote might have
some
grabbed it.
animal or whatever.
Well,
moved it.
I don't know any other animal, but my only explanation would be a coyote. I can't think of.
Are there mountain lions up there?
There have been, but
Yeah, but that's rare, right?
yes.
So, what do you believe our next step in this investigation is going to be?
Well, I would say go look in the pig pen and see if you find any more parts, and especially clothing.
Where else would we look, do you think? Do you think we would look other places too?
It's interesting that Susan is zoning in on the pig pen. No one else has explicitly floated the idea of Robert meeting his fate in there, and the leg was discovered outside the pen. Though in fairness, there is a rather finite amount of ways someone can wind up in that state. Anyway, the gist of what Susan's stance is right now seems to be, a coyote could have moved the leg from anywhere to where you found it, except from inside the pig pen, because coyotes wouldn't want to mess around with pigs. And in terms of where the police should look for the rest of Robert, maybe try the pig pen. This is self-contradictory, which means they're making progress.
Say there is a bullet hole in him. Say there is a mark that is from a sharp instrument. We can analyze that mark and actually see
Yes.
what metal is in there and the
Yes.
particles and
Yeah.
compare that to anything that somebody may have in their home or in their possession.
Yes.
And we clearly want to make sure that that happens. And we need to know if you have any knowledge of anything that happened to him, that now would probably be the time to tell us.
If my pigs did eat Robert, would you kill my pigs?
Well, I don't know. That's something we'd have to look at.
Misplaced priorities aside, clearly we have a breakthrough.
Susan, why don't you just tell us what happened?
Everything that I told you was the truth up until about a week after Bobby had called me. Sometime about a week after Bobby had called, I went down and he was like half eaten.
By what?
By the pigs.
Okay.
His guts were all over the place. He was still alive. I knew he wasn't going to be alive for more than a few more minutes. I went back up to my house and I got a gun and shot him in the head. I didn't want my pigs to be shot for not doing something that the natural causes. Well, pigs get hungry. If he was out there, I don't know what happened to start with. If he went out and started doing something to them, I can't see that my pigs would go ahead and do something to somebody without cause. They've always been very friendly with me. They still are very friendly with me. I didn't want to say anything because I was afraid you were going to go out and shoot my pigs.
That's not going to happen right now, okay? And we're going to look into that, but tell me, back at the beginning, how did you know Robert was there? Did you hear noise? What happened?
I came down in the morning. It was over a month since I had seen him last. And in the morning I came down and I heard this moaning and stuff. His guts were out, but he was still alive.
And how did you know he was alive?
I could see his arm moving. I yelled at the pigs. They were doing their thing. They're just, having lunch or breakfast. They were having breakfast on him.
Imagine being in a situation like this and feeling the need to make a correction like that.
So,
you went back into your house.
I went up and got my rifle and I shot him in the head.
How many times?
I don't know.
More than once?
I don't know. I went and fed my other animals, and I just left him there.
And so, as far as you know, he was never moved from that big place.
And if a leg bone did get over there, it's the only way it could have gotten over there was with a coyote or something. I'm not dumb enough to start moving bones around and putting them next to my house.
Oftentimes with confessions, a suspect will start off with the least incriminating version they can think of, and then slowly be inched closer toward the full truth. As far as first passes go, this was extremely macabre, but investigators still have plenty of reason to believe Susan is lying about significant details. To recap what's been disclosed so far, plus some additional tidbits going on during the Ford, Susan's story is that she went out to feed her pigs one morning, about a month after Robert vanished. She discovered Robert in the process of being eaten alive by her pigs and has no idea how he got in the pen. Figuring he was done for, she went back to her house, retrieved a rifle, came back and put him out of his misery. From there, she let the pigs continue eating him over a number of days, as this was the simplest way to dispose of the body, especially considering the process was already underway. After several days, she picked up Robert's skull and a few other stray parts left over, stashed them in a couple of plastic bags, and stored them in her property, which she draws a map to for investigators. No prizes for guessing where investigators suspect the lies are.
There's a piece here missing, it seems to me. That here's a person that never goes into that pig pen.
I don't know.
Never feeds those pigs.
I don't know.
And then he ends up in there mysteriously.
I don't know if he ever, like I say,
Did he come after you and threaten you? And something happened, Susan?
No, he never came after me or threatened me for any reason.
Did he do something to you or your place that caused you to do something to him?
No, he never did anything to me. The only thing he ever did to me was make a big mess. Right. And I'm not shooting somebody because I made a mess.
Because you got to see through my eyes that this story seems convenient.
I have no idea. I have no idea. I have no idea how he got in there or why he would go in there. I don't know if he had been in there prior to that.
To state the obvious, investigators believe Susan somehow came to shoot Robert in the head before feeding him to her pigs, and doubt he ever ran off to Ashland. But Susan will steadfastly refuse to take the bait on alternative questions like self-defense, basically sticking to her story. That's not to say she stonewalls the investigators, however. In fact, in some very remarkable ways, Susan Monica is honest to a fault.
I should not be saying it, but I'm trying to tell the truth. I do not value human life very much. My feeling is the only thing wrong with this planet is there's people on it. If it weren't for us, all the other animals, dodo birds and whatever else would still be here.
Whether or not you think a hostility toward the human race in general is justified, you can probably understand it's not an ideal conversation piece to pursue when you're at the center of an active homicide investigation. And even though the investigators try to keep things on Robert, Susan keeps circling back to it.
There are 7 billion people on the world, and we're destroying it constantly through just the simple fact of multiplication.
Overpopulating.
Overpopulating.
So what do we do about it? Nothing?
Well, China is doing something about it. China says you can have 1 kid.
And then after speaking approvingly of China's one-child policy, since discontinued, Susan starts expounding on the benefits of eugenics.
There are a number of diseases. Sickle cell anemia. Okay? There's a lot of people with sickle cell anemia. Okay? If you take everybody with sickle cell anemia and say you cannot reproduce, in 1 generation you have ended sickle cell anemia.
True.
And while Detective Henderson humours these ramblings for the sake of building some rapport, ultimately he's really wanting to get back on the whole feeding Robert to pigs thing.
Just put an X where your feet would have been.
I was on this side of him.
Okay.
And somewhere within a couple of feet.
So then it would have been the right side of his face would have been, or excuse me, the left side of his face would have been towards you?
Yes.
Okay.
But beyond clarifying a few logistical details here and there, Susan won't amend the core of her story, even when Detective Henderson gently points out some of its subtle weaknesses.
Why do you think the pigs would have been eating him there? I mean, if he was clothed, why his stomach?
I don't know.
I mean, if a person was to go into a pen and they fell down, because if I went into a pen and a pig started attacking me, I guarantee you I'd get out. Somehow I might be bit and stuff, if it was an angry pig, but I would get out somehow.
Like I say, my pigs are not mean. I have no idea why he would be there, and furthermore, I have no idea why they would go after him.
Eventually they bring in a polygraph technician named Chris to put some more pressure on. Susan shares some familiar thoughts with him.
There are diseases like sickle cell anemia that could be dealt with very simply by having people that have that gene to not have kids. And in 1 generation, we would not have that disease anymore.
Okay.
China allows people to have 1 child, which is very good.
But Chris too wants to get Susan off the broader topic of population control and back on the topic of Susan killing this one specific person.
Is there any circumstance you can think of where someone who killed Robert differently than you say how it happened should get a second chance?
If I had killed him for trying to rape me or something like that, then it's justifiable homicide.
Okay.
But if...
so there is some justification.
Well, yes, but no. There is justification in that sense, but I cannot think of a reason for killing someone just for the hell of it, or because you're having a sexual fantasy or something and you kill somebody, you strangle them or whatever.
Chris also accidentally opens up a whole can of worms with what's supposed to be a basic pretest question.
Have you... threatened to kill anybody for no reason? Have you, are you even that kind of a person?
The only person that I have not confronted and said that I wish they were dead is my neighbor, Karen. I very much, would like to go over and shoot her and feed her to my pigs.
Susan's desire to murder her neighbour Karen comes up an awful lot during the hours she's in this room. A reminder that this is back in 2014, before there was anything inherently funny about that. Now, it's not really an incriminating statement, as Karen Denman is known to be alive and well to police, and chances are she's not going to be having neighbourly quarrels with Susan Monica anymore. All the same, when you're at the centre of an active homicide investigation, it is still ill-advised to share any homicidal fantasies with police. Yes, even if asked. Don't try to score points for honesty.
Other than Karen, do you ever wish other people to die without reason?
No.
Solid response there, so credit where it's due. Susan does manage to talk about her anti-human philosophy from a few new angles. The long and short of it is we kill too many eagles, basically. On an unrelated note, she thinks cat should be spelled with a K. She sees some logic in spelling city with a C, but does wonder if it should be changed to an S. And it's not just the English-speaking world that's messing everything up.
French have T's at the end of a lot of words, which doesn't make any sense.
And sorry to keep this in, but just a quick point.
What's that right there? Is that something on the chair? Or?
No, that's something on me, which I hadn't done in 60 plus years.
Okay.
And that was totally, I think the camera's in that thing there, totally your fault.
What are you talking about?
I needed to go to the bathroom. They wouldn't let me go to the bathroom.
Well, do you need to go now?
No, I mean, this was when they, at 8 o'clock this morning.
Oh, okay.
Okay?
Yeah, okay, but if it really is out of the question to find Susan a change of pants, you'd think the least they could do is grab an old towel and switch out the chair. It's poo. Anyway, Chris finally conducts the polygraph examination, but can't get a readable chart because he believes Susan is deliberately messing with her breathing, which she claims she's not. Regardless, Chris gives up on the polygraph and decides to just take a shot at interrogating her himself, taking a similar tack to Detective Henderson by floating the idea of her accidentally killing Robert during some sort of scuffle.
I think this is a one-time thing, personally. I think it was an accident that you didn't mean to happen during an anxiety attack. It all fits. It's kind of the stuff that kind of leaks out of people when I talk to them. It's like, well, you get a little bit here and a little bit there. You talked about choking people. You talked about your anxiety. Yeah, you made a comment in there about, I can't remember what I did write it down.
Because you're having a sexual fantasy or something and you kill somebody, you strangle them or whatever.
It was a little interesting.
I don't remember saying anything about
it. You never said you choked him or you never said you choked anybody. It was kind of more along lines like what something you'd like to do or you thought about doing. You said if I killed him for trying to rape me, it would be a justified homicide.
Yes.
And I agree.
Yes.
You said I cannot think of a reason for killing someone just for the hell of it or because you had a sexual fantasy or something and you strangled them.
Yeah.
Okay, so, the human mind is amazing.
I misspoke on that thing.
I don't think you misspoke. I think that's because I asked you a question where I caused you to think about second chances. Yeah. What people do is they try, because of this self-protective mode, when I ask them that question, they think, well, maybe I should get a second chance, and so maybe I should tell this guy what their second chance, what reasons that you have for a second chance.
Yes.
Whether Susan's earlier comment was a subconscious disclosure of the real story, or just another one of the many random ill-advised comments she's prone to making, remains unclear. What is clear is that Chris has spent enough time with Susan Monica to be just about at the end of his tether.
If I did shoot him and feed him to the pigs, why did I leave all those bones there for all this time?
Susan, anybody that would shoot somebody and feed him to your pigs is capable of irrational thinking. Why someone would then keep the body parts for a couple months is another irrational thought. Don't ask me to answer that.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
No, I do agree with you on that, but I guess I'm always trying to be very rational, and it doesn't make any sense to me.
Just when he thought he was out, she pulls him back in. But after another 15 minutes of talking in circles around what is and isn't logical, Chris has an I'm not even supposed to be here today moment and hands Susan back to the people who are actually assigned to this case, which brings us back through to Detective Henderson's profound statement on the human understanding of pig diets.
We as people know that food for pigs is not a person.
Right. And
You know that.
right, I know that.
But you know that pigs will eat anything if you give them the opportunity.
Opportunity, yes.
Right.
And
So how did Robert give them an opportunity for
I
him
don't
to
know.
be in there?
I do not know. I do not
Okay.
know.
And in all the time that Robert had been there, did he ever feed the pigs?
To my knowledge, no.
Did he ever go out and in the pen that you
To
know?
my knowledge, no.
So you can see how when we listen to what you're saying,
I know that
you-
it, I
you
know
came
it,
out.
I
Hang
know
on just a second,
I know
okay?
it doesn't
Because
make sense.
I
It
know
doesn't
that.
make sense to me.
And so when you come out and you see your pigs eating Robert, and he's still alive,
Yes.
for us to hear that, it's not even possible. If you take anybody and you put them in a pig pen, even if they've been around pigs, they're going to know that if I start getting attacked by a pig or something, I'm going to try to get out of here.
Yes.
I'm not going to lay down on the ground and let pigs just eat my stomach
Right.
until I can't move and then have someone come shoot me in the head.
Detective Henderson walks a fine line here between pressing upon Susan that her story as it stands is not going to hold water and still maintaining that good cop frame of I'm on your side and I appreciate you for telling me some of the truth. Now all I need is the full truth and then we can start to make things better for you.
I want you to think about earlier when you came to that point. I don't know what it was with you, but you came to that point where you thought, I'm going to tell him. You made that decision to do that.
Yes.
And I feel like you're just right there on doing the right thing with the rest of it. We're just waiting on you. We're waiting for you to make that little step. It's just one tiny step away for you to make things right here.
And for whatever reason, perhaps a combination of Henderson's skillful interview tactics and just sheer exhaustion from sitting in her own excrement for hours on end, Susan begins to break and show signs she may be readying herself to cede more ground.
There is something else that I don't want to say.
All you can do is tell me.
But
I'm here to listen.
But it doesn't make sense. That's the thing.
Okay. I'm just going to listen. You tell me.
Oh, God, give me another piece of paper. Right there, about 3 feet down, there's part of another body.
Okay.
His name is Steve.
His name was Steve Delacino, and clearly the act of killing him didn't do much to forever sear that name into Susan Monica's mind. So at this point, Susan isn't actually budging at all on how Robert's fate came about, but the disclosure of an entirely separate body police will find buried on the farm is still a positive development.
We did get into a fight. I had several guns, one of which was a little bitty 5-shot revolver.
Mm-hmm.
In my room, I had a 30-06 with a scope on it. Steve was a thief. He lived about 5 miles up the road from me. He was an alcoholic. He would go through the house. At one point, I remember him stealing some silver dollars, which were worth, $2 or $3. And he took them down to the store just to buy beer.
Oh, jeez.
He would come over to my place. He was a very good worker.
Yep.
I'd buy him a half a case of beer.
Mm-hmm.
he came down to my place, and I confronted him on the guns that were missing. And he did get physical with me.
What did he do?
I did not think he would do that.
Yeah.
He got physical with me, and I told him that I was pretty sure it was him that stole my rifle,
Yeah.
and I had a 356 pistol. He got all upset, and I had a little 22 pistol.
Mm-hmm.
He went ahead and reached for where I had still had the little pistol,
Right.
and
Where was it?
it was on my bed.
Oh, okay.
We started to have a little tussle, nothing big to start with, and he says, "Well, I'm not going back to jail for stealing your stuff or anybody else's stuff." He grabbed the little pistol and he shot himself in the head.
Right there in your home?
Right there.
Where did he shoot himself in the head at?
Well, that was the whole stupid thing. He shot himself, and then he ran out. I didn't know it at the time. I always thought, it was a little bitty gun. It wouldn't kill you, but it would certainly hurt.
Yeah.
And it's 5 shots, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
He went out of the room. He went around into that little hallway.
Yeah.
And I'm following him.
Yeah.
And he emptied the gun in his own head. I could not believe it.
And who could blame her? After all, a man shooting himself in the head, then running out of the room and shooting himself in the head again 4 times is an extremely unbelievable thing. Detective Henderson has likely cottoned on to that, but he keeps it close to his chest for the time being while he clarifies the basics. Susan explains that after Steve finally managed to fatally shoot his own head, she wound up deciding the pigs were the best way to dispose of the body, naturally.
And then right here is where Steve's remains are right
Yes.
now. And so this was a couple years ago.
This was a couple of years ago, and you guys actually came out.
Uh-huh.
I was picking up his bones.
Mm-hmm.
There was no meat on him any longer.
Yeah. How long do you think he stayed out here?
It was a couple of 3 weeks.
Okay.
There were a bunch of bones from pigs and sheep and goats, and I decided to get rid of everything.
Mm-hmm.
So I went ahead and I dug a hole over there,
Okay.
and my good old neighbors, they saw me throwing bones in a hole,
Mm-hmm.
so they called you,
Oh.
and a couple people came out, and they said, somebody saw you throwing bones in a hole.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, right there. The guy said, "Oh, well, that's a pig bone." And I said, "Yes."
Mm-hmm. Were there any bones of Steve's mixed into them?
Yes,
Right there that the cops were looking at?
pretty much.
Okay.
I said they were buried about 2 feet down. I asked him if he wanted a shovel. He didn't want a shovel, and he left.
Mm-hmm.
It might seem like shoddy police work with the benefit of hindsight, but in fairness, 99.9% of the time, if you see a farmer disposing of bones, they probably did all come from animals, and you have to be somewhat selective with what you send into the crime lab. Detective Henderson tries to extract more particulars around Steve's extraordinary demise.
Did he say anything? Did he just stand there? Or what happened exactly?
No, I mean, he grabbed the gun and I grabbed him, but he took his hand and shot himself. He said, "I'm killing myself, I'm not going back to jail." He shot himself the once. He ran out, I chased him, and he got over into the other room, and I grabbed him again. I thought, that you shoot somebody at point blank range with this little gun, I thought he would have died right then.
Yeah.
And it just bounced off. He got loose from me. He ran around, and he emptied the gun in his head.
The part about Susan actively wrestling with Steve is new, and it should go without saying it's a very significant detail to have not mentioned during her first telling.
And he did a total of how many shots?
5.
5 total? Oh,
Yeah.
it was a 5-shot.
A little 5-shot revolver. I mean, you could put it in your palm of the hand.
You don't remember where it was, though?
No.
Okay. Was Steve dead when the pigs started eating him?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
How can you be sure?
The 5 shots in the head were probably the biggest clue to that end. Though if he did in fact survive the first 4 like Susan claims, you could see why Henderson might think extra special caution would have been warranted before the pig feeding. Clearly understanding her story is a tough sell, Susan tests the waters a bit by acknowledging as much.
It sounds impossible that something like this could happen to me twice within a couple of years.
It sounds strange. It does.
Yes.
I've never heard of somebody shooting themselves 5 times in the head. I haven't.
Detective Henderson continues to press the implausibility of Susan's story using his gentler approach for some time. But Susan still won't budge, so Detective Fox comes in and lays things out more bluntly.
You've told us about 2 things that happened there. Both times that you've told these stories, you've told them in a way that you're trying to relieve responsibility from you. Now, I'm going to tell you, one of the things I do is I'm a deputy medical examiner. That means...
I realize what that is.
Right. I examine people. I determine cause and manner of death.
Yes.
I've examined over 1,000 people.
Yes.
Never have I in any literature or personally or heard ever somebody shooting themselves 5 times in the head. Ever.
It is.
What I'm telling you is that doesn't happen. Let me tell you what I'm seeing.
I understand.
I think there's a minute possibility that maybe Steve did shoot himself one time. But you're kind of the person that would put somebody out of their misery if they were suffering. Such as what happened with Robert, the story you told about Robert. He's suffering, isn't he?
Yes.
And you felt obligated to not have him suffer. Just like any other animal, you don't want somebody to suffer, do you?
Right. When you find his skull, it's about 3 feet down, because it was about 2 feet when those other officers came out.
Right, and there's going to be 5 holes in it, isn't there?
There's going to be 1 hole in it, and 4 indentations.
So these bounced off his head?
Yes. There's 4.
But at some point something went into his head, right?
There's 4 indentations in his head and 1 hole.
So one went right into him.
Yes.
So Susan's sort of tripling down in a sense, as not only is she standing by her story, but going as far as to assert that when they dig up Steve's remains, they will in fact find physical verification of a semi-bulletproof skull with dents where bullets bounced off of it. You'd think at that point Fox would call it quits for the day, but clearly he still thinks a full confession might be within reach, because they keep talking in circles around these sorts of things for quite some time more.
So we had the improbable situation of somebody shooting themselves 5 times.
Yes.
And then somehow getting drug out into the pig yard.
Yes, that was a couple days later.
Right. And then we have the improbable situation of Robert magically appearing in the pig yard.
Yes.
After a month of absence, he just magically appears in the pig yard.
Yes.
Barely holding on to the ends of his life. And you chose him over the pigs.
I would convict myself on both counts, but I am guilty of neither.
Susan continues to maintain the "I know it sounds impossibly ridiculous, but I'm telling the truth" stance, and eventually Detective Fox gives up and throws it back to Detective Henderson for some more good cop rapport building.
So I heard you talking to Chris earlier about that you only had the name Susan Monica for a while.
Yes.
What's your real name?
Not saying.
Okay.
Too difficult.
Okay.
There's probably 2 or 3 people in the valley know, and that's too many for me.
Can I ask, is it just to get away from a past
No.
a long time ago?
No.
Okay.
When someone as strange as Susan Monica comes along, it can be sort of difficult to imagine them having a past. But of course she does, and as a matter of fact, her biography is quite interesting.
When I was 5 years old, my brother was born, and he looked like me. And when I was 9 years old, my sister was born, and she was different. And I asked my mother, and she told me the birds and the bees, and I had known the birds and the bees for a couple of years anyway. And I said, well, I'm not a bird, I'm a bee, or whichever way it worked. And she said, no, you're not, you have to be a boy. When I was in high school, I had all kinds of girlfriends. And I had guys coming around asking me what the heck I was doing. And I said, well, I don't know, we're friends, and that was it, we were friends. This was in 63, 64, 65, and there was nothing about this in the news at all. But the girls at school, they somehow picked up on who I was. And then I got out of high school, and I joined the Navy, and I was somewhat convinced that if I joined the Navy, it would make a man out of me. And then being in the Navy, everybody on ship, with the exception of me, I guess, would get off the ship, look for the nearest bar and the nearest brothel, and I would go out and just walk around, see the sights, do some little shopping here and there. Anyway, after 3 years and 7 months, I got my discharge, honorable discharge, and I was down in San Diego. I was looking at a magazine, and I saw in the magazine this article about Christine Jorgensen, who had just had the surgery. I think I read the article about 4 or 5 times, and I said that was me. And I saw the doctor that had been mentioned in the article, and after a little while anyway, he went ahead and started me on hormones, and a couple years later, I got the money up and had the surgery. And I've never regretted it once. I was married for 14 years. My husband, he never said anything. I guess that's about all I have to say on that subject.
Regardless of what you told us, we will find the truth.
Yes.
So if you did leave things out, or you lied about things like that, you need to think about that tonight.
And it seems that Susan took Detective Henderson's instructions to heart, because the next day she did in fact want to make a small amendment to her story regarding Robert Haney.
Basically, what I had been trying to forget, I remembered laying there. When I came into the pen, his head was towards the west. He was belly up, and the pigs were on him. And I went up to get my gun. When I got back, I think he did die. I'm pretty sure he did die, because he was on his stomach and his head was now pointed to the east, and he was turned over. He was facing the other way, and I shot him about C1 or C2 at an angle coming out to the right orbital, which, that's it.
So in sum, Susan wanted to disclose that she now remembers shooting Robert in the head from a different angle than she recalled yesterday. That may well be true, but Detective Henderson and Detective Julie Denny, who's new to the room, were hoping for some more significant amendments, like Robert didn't actually miraculously appear in the pig pen after a month's absence, or Steve didn't actually shoot himself in the head 5 times. No such luck though, and despite Susan's best efforts, investigators just refused to listen to reason.
Would you sit still while I fired 5 shots at your head?
No, that's what I'm saying.
Okay. That's
what I'm saying.
That's the point we're making
That,
right there.
that's what I'm trying to say to you is, if someone's shot one time, that alone would probably incapacitate them. They wouldn't fire off another round to their head and keep shooting at their own head, or not move enough to get away from it just doesn't make sense.
Well, so says Julie, and as if their relentless disbelief wasn't insulting enough.
I just wanted to ask you again, are we going to find anybody else
No,
out there?
not to my knowledge.
Well, that's good.
Any No, don't even say it.
What, anybody that we do find, what?
That's my idiotic, stupid.
Well, now you've
Brain.
said some things to me though, and the way that you say things, like the comment about, kill you and feed you to my pigs.
I know.
Or
and
feed people to pigs, and that turned out to be true.
Yeah, on a couple of occasions, but 3 times? Give her some credit.
I have a weird sense of humor.
Well, this isn't funny. At this point.
The joke became reality.
Mm-hmm. But you continued to make that joke, even after it became reality.
You even said that to me. You said you were going to kill me and feed me your pigs. That actually is just, I didn't even know what to say. I'm a police officer. I didn't even know what to say. You know what I mean? I was like, whoa.
Henderson still just doesn't get it, so Susan shares a recent anecdote to clarify how she quips about murdering law enforcement.
Over there at the jail, one of the guards, she's got hair all the way down to her ass. Okay? And I told her, hey, I could grab your hair and strangle you with it.
Oh my gosh, why would you say that?
I don't know.
Tough crowd, but at the end of the day, there's more important matters at hand than the unique comedy stylings of Susan Monica, so eventually they get back to business.
After the first year of knowing Karen, I have never liked her. She believes the road belongs to her, it belongs to me. I can go down and show her proof. She doesn't believe it. I signed an agreement letting her use the road. I want to make improvements. She does not. I took out 4 feet of dirt to make the road instead of like this. She tried to get money from the guy that I gave the dirt to. This is her. She's the bitch from hell.
We'll try that again. Eventually they get back to business.
If I were going to kill somebody, she would be number 1. She would be number 1.
Eventually they get back to business.
If you have 24 diseases out there that are all caused by genetic defects, take the people that, before you have a child, don't kill the people, just tell them, hey, you have this disease, don't reproduce.
Understandably enough, after a bit more of this, Detective Henderson decides it's time for a break.
Can I get you a soda again? You want a soda? I'm going to get something to drink real quick.
I want my nuts back.
Your nuts? Okay.
Henderson retrieves some nuts for Susan, which she notably eats while recalling some pretty harrowing memories.
At first, he was on his back. One arm was out here. Big hole.
But aside from the addition of some inappropriate chewing, day 2 of Susan Monica's interrogation really is just more of the same. She's not at all receptive to changing any of her story, aside from precisely how she shot Robert Haney. And if that wasn't enough to tell you the reality of this situation hasn't totally settled in for Susan, she winds up developing a big preoccupation with police needlessly digging up her farm, just because no one will take her word that there is a maximum of 2 dead bodies buried there.
I think you're gonna make a fucking mess out of my place.
What are we supposed to do? I guarantee there's more people on your property. I guarantee it.
What do I get for the guarantee?
What do you mean?
You are saying you're guaranteeing there's more people out on my property.
Yes, that's
Am I going to get $150,000 to fix up my place after you've messed it up?
If we find one person, it's worth messing up the property.
I'm saying if you do not find anybody out there, are you going to pay me $150,000 to put it back the way it was?
No, absolutely not.
That's what I'm saying. There's no guarantee of nothing here.
Well, what do you want?
I don't want you messing up my place after me and Steve have put so much into it.
Well, you have to appreciate the sentiment at least. In Susan's defense though, sincerely this time, even though Detective Henderson is in the right, there's a sort of circular logic in how he's putting it to Susan that would be frustrating to interact with.
That's why we have to unearth everything. If we miss one single person, we're not doing our job. Now, if I knew exactly where those people were at, we wouldn't go make a mess, would we? We know exactly where to look.
Just like when you were to look for Robert.
Then we dig up a little hole and we get the person out, and that's the end of it.
No, if Susan told them about 5 bodies, they'd still suspect there could be more. Rightly. Bottom line, that farm is being turned into a giant dirt pit no matter what.
You're saying that you guarantee almost 100% that you're going to find somebody. But if you don't find anybody, you're not going to quit. You're not going to fix my property. You're going to leave me with a big mess.
Well, I'm so sure of finding someone, it doesn't matter anyway.
Ultimately, Detective Henderson would wind up being half right. He was wrong in the sense that they didn't wind up finding someone else, but right in the sense that it didn't matter anyway. 2 dead people was more than enough to ensure Susan would never have any relationship with the property ever again.
No bail. That's all at this time. Ms. Monica.
Can I make one more statement?
I think your attorney would prefer that you not.
That's correct, Susan. Don't say anything.
I would like the people of Rogue River to donate a small amount of money so that I can have my pigs butchered and the meat given to the Rogue River Community Center.
At the Rogue River Community Center, workers have been dealing with being mentioned by Monica in court. They won't accept the pig meat because it won't be USDA butchered, but most of all, they just don't want to be pulled into that mess.
Are we going to take the pig meat? Well, no.
During Susan Monica's bail hearing, gruesome details came out of the woman's alleged killings.
I'm going to set this out for pretrial in the first week of September.
Oh, God.
Yes.
Monica gasped when she heard she'd remain in jail. She's facing 2 counts of murder, abuse of a corpse, and ID theft.
Well-known animal activist group PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, says they're looking at putting a billboard up in Medford that would capitalize on the attention on the Susan Monica murder trial.
The goal, they say, is to remind people that the meat on their plates was once a living, feeling animal, and encouraging everyone to extend compassion to all living beings.
And in other news, we also learned today that Monica will play a role in her trial. She will be able to question witnesses, but not in front of a jury.
Susan Monica grilling Jackson County Sheriff Detective Eric Henderson, the same man she jokingly threatened to kill and feed to her pigs.
What did you do about my pigs?
Yesterday, defense attorneys said Delacino's death was in self-defense, but in the confession video, she says he killed himself. 2 points that never changed, however. She said her pigs would never harm anyone, and she doesn't value human life. Longtime neighbor Karen Denman, who admits she had a strained relationship with Monica, says she didn't know who was arguing, but she often heard yelling.
He was actually hollering in the middle of the night, and I hadn't really met him other than just seen him on the road.
Life in prison for Susan Monica, with the minimum of 50 years before she can get parole for killing Stephen Delacino in 2012 and Robert Haney in 2013 on her Rogue River ranch. She claimed it was self-defense in Delacino's case and wanted to put Haney out of his misery. Jurors didn't buy it, neither did Haney's family.
In regards to her change of story with Steve Delacino, Susan's new version started similarly to her original. She confronted Steve about the stolen guns, which caused him to freak out over the prospect of going back to prison. He then grabbed one of Susan's rifles that was nearby and began beating her with it, busting her right breast implant. Susan managed to retrieve her small Derringer pistol and shot Steve in the head with it. The shot did not kill him though, she would later learn, because the bullet had missed his brain and become lodged in his scalp. She got away from him for a time, but he chased her into the barn and continued to attack her. She was able to wrestle the rifle away from Steve, who then went down and grabbed her by the leg. She soon fired the rifle into Steve's head several times as he kept grabbing onto her leg. She would later learn this was a death grip, and that Steve was likely dead after the first shot from the rifle. Whether or not this final version of Susan's story is the full truth, or just a little closer to it than her initial preposterous attempt at a lie, God only knows. As for Robert Haney, you probably won't feel any need to appeal to the heavens above to know if she was full of it when it came to his miraculously appearing in the pen that morning, but she still stands by that explanation to this day. No further attempts have been made by law enforcement to get the full truth from Susan Monica, likely because everyone who's ever tried has just wound up being tired of talking to her.